This activity is a follow-up to what you did this past Wednesday. In this activity, you are going to be looking at the taxonomic organization of some big cats, specifically tigers, go tigers, and you are going to be evaluating whether or not one type of tiger might become its own species and what you would have to look for if in order to determine whether or not one type of tiger becomes its own species. Before we get into how to do the activity, we need to review a little bit about taxonomy. Taxonomy is how we classify species, and how we classify species are based on evolutionary relationships, such as common ancestry and DNA sequences. And the system that we use to classify organisms goes from broad to specific, the broad being the domain and the specific being species. So this sentence sort of shows the different levels of classification when we classify animals. Do kids prefer candy over fresh green salad? So if you remember that sentence, you'll remember all the different levels. Do stands for domain, kids for kingdom, prefer for phylum, candy is class, over is order, fresh is family, green is genus, and salad is species. So there are three main domains. These are very broad categories, the broadest categories of classification. All eukaryotes, cells with nuclei, are in the domain eukarya. That's where you're going to find all of our animals. So that's what we are going to focus on. Next we have kingdoms. These are specifically eukaryotic kingdoms. Protists, plants, fungi, and then we are going to be focusing on the kingdom Animalia, since that is where all the animals can be found. And then classification gets more and more specific as organisms are grouped into phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So this diagram sort of shows how that hierarchical system of classification starts off really broad and then narrows it down each level. So for example, we have the kingdom Animalia. This includes all the animals, insects, fishes, snakes, birds, and all mammals, like pigs, dogs, and pandas and bears. We can then start to these into smaller and smaller groups based on similarities. So in the phylum Chordata, these are specifically vertebrate animals. So the insects are invertebrates, so they are not included in this grouping. We can break it down even further into mammals. That's the class, and so we eliminate the snake and the fish because they are not mammals. And we can get more specific. Carnivores. This includes dogs, panda, black bear, and grizzly bear, but we've eliminated the pig. Then we get into family, Ursidae. This is specific to bears, so we get rid of the dog. And then genus, Ursus, we're left with just the black bear and the grizzly bear. And then finally, the species is the horribilis, or the grizzly bear. So we go from a very broad category, including all animals, to very, very specific, just one type of animal at the species level. The last thing I want to talk about are scientific names. All organisms, including animals, have a two-part name, which includes the genus and the species. So in the previous example, we looked at the grizzly bear, which would be Ursus horribilis. Canis lupus is another scientific name for wolf. Gorilla is another scientific name for gorillas. And so all scientists around the world use the system of naming organisms. The first reason why they do this is to overcome language barriers to different animals, for the different common names of animals. For example, a dog in English is dog, but a dog in Spanish is perro. So if you have a Spanish speaking scientist and an English speaking scientist, if they both use the Latin name, the genus and the species, Canis familiaris, then they know that they are both talking about the same animal. The other issue with common names is that they can be misleading. For example, this is an insect called the silverfish, but it's not a fish. So that name can be misleading. And then sometimes with certain animals, we can have multiple common names for the same animal. So, for example, this animal right here, you can refer to it as a cougar, a mountain lion, a puma, or a Florida panther. But if you use the scientific name for it, puma concolor, then everyone knows that you are talking about the same animal. So the first thing that you're going to do in this activity is you're going to look at this chart that shows all of the different levels of taxonomic organization for a number of big cats. So there's lions, a couple different tigers, cheetahs, leopards, and ocelots. You're going to make some observations. And then there's a short reading about taxonomy and how we categorize animals and give them that two-part name. And then you're going to go back into the chart. You're going to list all of the cats that are of the same genus. And then you're going to answer a question about DNA. And then you're going to use common names, list all of the cats that are of the same species. So the common names are listed across the top of the chart. So you're going to use the common names to identify which cats are the same species. And then we shift into a speciation. So there's a map showing where those big cats are found, and then a short reading that shows the different countries of where these tigers are found. And then you're going to explain which tiger you think is more likely to become its own species and how that would happen and how could you determine whether it was its own species. If you have any questions, send me an email.